So here we're taking a look at Signorie. Now in this game, players will be the head of a family during the Renaissance era, trying to bring more power and influence to their particular family. And you'll do this through alliances with other families of Italy at the time. The game itself is played over 7 rounds, with each round being divided into 3 phases. Now the first phase in the game is simply more of a maintenance phase, and you're going to do 3 things. The first thing you're going to do is check any of the cities. If any of these slots are currently blank, you would pull from the stack and replace them with new tiles. The next thing you're going to do is collect up all of the action dice, roll them, and put them back into their specific areas. The last thing you're going to do is collect up all of these assignment tiles, shuffle them around, and then place them back randomly. From here, we're going to move into the perform actions phase. Now, the perform actions phase, each player has an option to either take a die from the pool, bring it here and take an action, or to pass. However, if you pass, you are out for the remainder of that phase. The phase will end once all players have passed. You are going to get to take up to 4 dice, however, throughout that phase. And to do so, you simply select one and bring it to your board. Now, the dice themselves will have a number that they've been rolled, and there's an associated number on your board. The number on the board is how much it costs to take that action, whereas the number on the die is the discount against that. So in the case of the turquoise here, if I were to take it and take this 5, it would cost me nothing. However, if I took this 4, it would cost me 1 florin. Now this is important because while it's nice to get a discount, you also need to worry about not going above 13. Because if your total dice here equal 13, more than 13 at the end of this round, you're going to be ineligible for bonus rewards unless you've taken the action and put meeples here that allow you to bump that threshold up. Once you place a die on here, you get to take one of the 3 actions associated with it. Now all of the colors have this little assignment as an possible action. And that means that if I did the turquoise, I could come up here and do one of these 2. But let's say for the sake of argument that I took the yellow. If I took the yellow, I could come up here and do one of these 2. Now, you have one for your female members of your family and one for male members of your family. And those are your stock that you have here. In doing so, you will have a printed number, such as this one that says 2 in the corner, that is the number of meeples I would need to discard back to the supply in order to take it. So in the case of this, I would need to spend 2 of my females, put them back up here, and then I would get to take this action. I'm not going to go through all of the actions. I'll only go through some of them as they're important to the rules explanation, but this one here would allow me to do a diplomatic assignment, which I'll explain here in a second. The next type of actions down here is something specific to that area. Now, in the case of the yellow, it is simply to get 3 florins. But in the case of the purple, which is the important one, it'll allow us to reproduce and have children. Now you're going to get to roll a white die for each married male of your family. And when you start at the game, you're the only one married, so you would roll 1 white die. And in doing so, you will, on a 1, 2, or 3, you will get to take a female member into your supply, and on a 4, 5, or 6, you would take a male. So in this case, we rolled a 3, so we would get to bring a lady into our supply. The other types of actions here, you have diplomatic, you have marriage, which we'll cover in a bit, and then you have this one, which allows you to basically get the male members of your family a job and move them up the track. Now this one is a wild card, so you would get to select. This is a good time to stop and actually explain how that track works in relation to it. So in this case, we can move up to 4. Now that means that we could move a male member 1 and then go 2, 3, 4. We could go up that way. Or we could go 1 here, maybe 1, so 2, 3, and we could also move up the initiative by 1. So we've used our 4. Now these are going to be important when I explain diplomatic missions, but they also will get rewards when they hit certain milestones. It is important to note that only the male meeples can go on this track. In addition, the last type of thing that we have on here is, you'll notice it shows to lay one of these down. Now, in the case of this, we went to the yellow. If we chose to do this action, we don't get to put a helper here in the yellow. We actually get to put it in the turquoise column. And in doing so, we can choose where we want to put it, but it will cost us to hire that helper. So if I did this one, it would cost me 3 florins. So I would spend that now, but however, that helper will stay there. And the next time I take the associated turquoise action, whatever one I choose here doesn't matter, I will also get any helpers I have. And in this case, I would get 3 victory points. As I said earlier, you can do diplomatic missions. Now, diplomatic missions are this symbol right here, and they do allow you to move somebody from this path out to one of the cities. And in doing so, it doesn't matter which track they're coming from as far as completing the mission. That only matters as far as the rewards that you would get for doing it. However, you have to go into the lowest printed spot in the city, and you have to at least be at a skill level. So in the case of here right now, we could go into the 1, and we could take the tile as long as we're eligible to take it. Now, the way that works is this guy came from the political track, which means it's going to have to go into my political section here. And it just so happens that that is part of my plan. If this was not part of my plan, or I'd already filled those 2 slots, I just would not take the tile. But in this case, I do take the tile. And I will get victory points equal to the number printed on where it came from. Now, it's important to note here that as they move up, if this had already been filled in this way, and this guy had been here, he could not have come into the city because there was only a 2 available, and he is only a level 1. Also important to note is if you can't use the tile that you're bringing, then you don't take it, but it does not stop you from actually placing there. The other type of action we can take out here is the marriage ones. Now, the marriage ones are printed on the board here and anywhere you see that symbol. And that simply allows you to take a woman of your family and marry her into another family. And that is going to be this track down here. By default, you're trying to get one of your family members married into each of the other houses. And in doing so, it's the same rules. You have to go into the lowest printed spot. So in this case, I could go here with it, and that's going to allow me to take this tile. But first, I have to pay the dowry, and the dowry is going to be the cost printed on there. So by default, I'm going to have to pay 2 florins for it. However, that's going to get me 4 victory points. You do have the option to overpay up to 4. So even though I'm going into the 2, I could choose to pay 4 florins and get 8 victory points. In addition, I would take the tile and place it into this. Now, the important thing about these particular tracks is that you're trying to get at least 3 tiles into them in order to score them at the end of the game. Any of these at the end of the game that don't have at least 3 will score you no victory points at all. You can fill it in with anything that you see here up to it, and you can also fill it in sometimes with the backs of them as basically wild cards, but they're just unknown families, and there is 1 victory point, and they do count towards the 3 and do not take away the other things. So this one calls for 4, and I could do all 4 and then an unlimited number of those. Once every player has passed, we will move into the rewards phase. The first thing we're going to do is score initiative victory points. Anybody who is on this track in a victory point slot would get the associated points. Then, in the order going down, we would change the initiative order for the next round. So in the case of right now, red would actually move into first place and blue would move into second. And then these are restacked going from last player up to first on top. Ties are broken based on who's on top of the stack. Then we will check our reward tiles. Now, as I said before, you're looking to see that you're not over the threshold. Provided that you have not crossed over the threshold, you would get to take the reward of that action of this round. And in this case, each person who qualifies for it would get to take one of these tiles and place it into any of the spots on their board that they wish. If you wish to not take the particular reward tile currently, you do have the option to just take 3 florins. Also, a wedding will happen. And in the first round, that's just a single wife here, and you will place it on your board next to your first son, and so now later when you do the reproduce, you would be able to roll an additional die. During later rounds, you'll notice that there is a money amount, and that is a dowry that you'll receive in addition. Now that's going to be rounds 1 through 5. Rounds 6 and 7 are slightly different in that there won't be any weddings, but there will be victory points, and it will tell you what they are, and in the case of this one, it's 4 victory points for each of your female members of your family in a city. Now, it's not, 2 in this city. It's, in this case, it's, if I have 1 in this city, I get 4 points. If I have at least 1 in this city. But in the next round, it's for each of 2 points for each female member, period, out in the cities. In addition, during those rounds, you can pay exactly 5 florins for 5 victory points. After the 7th round is scored, then you will do a final endgame scoring, where each male member of your family that is over here will get half the victory points rounded down of the printed number they are in. So in this case, we would get no points for this one, and we would get 1 victory point for this. Then we're going to score out these alliance tiles in our plan. Now again, you have to have at least 3 in a row, and if you do, then you get the printed value on all of them. Any rows that do not have at least 3 score nothing. Whoever has the most points is the winner. So that's a look at Signorie. Now the first thing I'm going to say is I was afraid I would have a bias in my review of this, because I typically buy What's Your Game title sight unseen, and I always know what I'm going to get. I'm going to get a medium to heavy Euro with a drier theme, but something I'm going to enjoy playing over and over again. It's going to have a lot of strategy to it. The fact of the matter is, I don't think I like this one very much. There's nothing wrong with the game. It's not broken. It's just not very replayable. The first time I played it, I did enjoy it, but on subsequent plays, I enjoyed it less and less. Now, the game has some random elements to set up in terms of the reward tiles and round around with the assignments, and obviously the dice that are being rolled, but beyond that, it started to feel like I was doing the same thing over and over again. And then there are little things in the game that don't really bother you the first time, but might on subsequent plays, such as spending entire action just to put a helper out to help you later. It feels like you did a whole lot of nothing. The artwork in the game is drab, even by What's Your Game standards. The caricatures up top of the family heads is nice, but everything else in the game feels like an afterthought. It feels really boring sitting on the table, and you're going to have a hard time getting someone excited to play it. Speaking of getting someone excited to play it, I am going to address one other touchy subject in the game, and it's more related to the current political climate at the time of this review. The game itself is a period piece, and in that aspect, there's going to be the whole male-female thing, and the women within the game are going to be marriage and having birth, and the men in the family are going to be having jobs and learning and going on diplomatic missions. And for some people, they're just not going to be okay with that. And you need to be okay with the fact that they're not going to be okay with it. And that possibly, even if they do play, there might be some conversation at the table that you didn't intend to happen. I think What's Your Game did a decent job of trying to amp up the importance of women in the period, but there was only so much you could do given the time frame. The game itself, again, as I said, it's not bad, but I hesitate to recommend this game as a buy game for almost anyone, unless you're like me and you buy What's Your Game games no matter what. They do all seem to sit on the shelf nice next to each other, but I definitely recommend this possibly as a play game at least once. The first time you play it, it is interesting to figure out the puzzle to it. Beyond that, you're probably not going to want to sit down and do this again. The game goes much longer than it should. At 2 players, the game is kind of dull, and at 3 players, it shines. I think it actually sits well. 4 players, for me, the game was way too long. I personally am going to keep the game in my collection simply because it looks nice on my shelf, but I don't feel like this is a game that I'm going to pull out ever again, maybe once. I hope this has given you an idea of how the game plays and if it's something that maybe you might be interested in or possibly not, and I look forward to seeing you guys next time.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at DicetowerNetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.